thank you for being with us today. I appreciate you taking the time. Will you just introduce yourself and your role for our congregation?
Yeah, so my name is Luke Elzinga, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Manager at the Des Moines Area Religious Council, or DMARC.
Okay, great. And can you talk to us a little bit, like what does that role entail at DMARC?
Yeah, so this is actually a fairly new role. I just started in January. I've been with the organization for 9 years, but started off in a communications role, and gradually we took on more advocacy efforts, and eventually this January my role was split in two. So I'm now working full time doing policy and advocacy work, and we hired someone else to do marketing and communications, which I'm really excited about. A lot of my work revolves around policy advocacy with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. So this past legislative session, we were fighting against a number of harmful bills related to SNAP. We've been doing that, playing defense on SNAP for the past 7 years. This year, they finally were able to pass something. Thankfully, we were able to get, through our advocacy and working with a lot of different coalition partners, we were able to get some of the most harmful pieces of that legislation removed, but there were some pieces passed. There's an asset test for SNAP. The bill was Senate File 494. It actually still has not been signed by the governor as of 1:10 p.m. on May 31st. I will just put an asterisk with that. We anticipate that the governor will sign it, but we had a joint letter from over 200 interfaith leaders calling on Governor Reynolds to veto the legislation. And that's part of my work is working with our food pantry partners, people experiencing hunger and food insecurity, our faith communities, to really, speak out on the importance of the SNAP program. What we do through our food pantry network is obviously really important, but we can't do that all on our own. SNAP is the best tool we have in our tool belt to fight food insecurity. The amount of SNAP benefits that go out in Polk County every month is about 3 times our annual operating budget. And
Wow.
that's just in one month. So, you know, anytime that there's changes to SNAP policy, we see that at our food pantry network. During the pandemic, there were additional benefits that were going out. We actually saw a drop in our numbers. Now, that's not to say that the need wasn't, suddenly decreased. I think the need was higher, but we saw, increases to SNAP, increases to other food programs, unemployment benefits, stimulus payments, and those really helped people experiencing hardship in our community not necessarily have to use a food pantry. What we were saying is, oh, surprise, when you raise SNAP benefits, people don't have to use food pantries as often. Like that obviously makes sense, but we definitely saw that in our data. And what we let people know the entire time was, look, we're really concerned about when these additional benefits go away and what's going to happen. And that's exactly what we saw. April of last year, those emergency allotments went away. We immediately saw double-digit increases at our food pantries, and those have continued. We're breaking records every month, and we're seeing record numbers of new people as well. And so that's why policy advocacy is so important for us at DMARC. Not only is it the right thing to do, and not only is it the best way that we can reduce hunger and food insecurity is having a strong safety net, but also making sure that people don't have to be trapped in poverty, that we have, like living wages and affordable housing and all these other intersecting issues, because we know hunger and food insecurity, they don't exist on their own. It's tied in with all these other structural issues of poverty and the root causes. And we're serious when we say we'd like to put ourselves out of business, at least as it relates to our food pantry network. Our idea of ending hunger is not just providing more and more food in more places to more people. it's actually shortening the line at our food pantries. So
Okay.
maybe they still need to exist for people in an emergency situation, some a giant crisis, or disaster relief, but not what we've become is just another way for people who are struggling to get by to meet their family's needs. And we want to be there to provide that support, but we also want to make sure that we're addressing the root cause issues. And that's why we engage in policy advocacy at DMARC.
And so I'm curious, I think maybe you've listed some of these already, but what would you say are some of those most challenging obstacles to really ending food insecurity?
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of jumped the gun on that a little
No,
bit
you're fine.
because when I was looking at that, to me, our biggest challenge in ending food insecurity is that it's so interconnected with other issues that
Okay.
we can't just focus on, food pantries or providing more nutritious food or even SNAP, like we need to also be focusing on affordable housing, childcare, healthcare, transportation, all these other social determinants of health, also systemic issues like racism in our community that we know also contribute to food insecurity, and gender-based oppression. So it's not that food insecurity exists just on its own, and oh, if we target enough resources right at this, we'll be able to solve it. We know it's connected to all these other systemic issues, and that's how we approach it with a kind of systems level approach because we know we're not going to be able to solve it just on its own.
And so for those of us who are not familiar with DMARC, what specifically does DMARC do to really address food insecurity? I know you've talked about your role a little bit. Is that the majority of it? Is there, you mentioned the food pantry there on the south side now. Can you speak more
Yeah.
to that?
My role, I'm very passionate about it, but it's a small piece of what we do. We do some advocacy work, we do some interfaith dialogue work.
Okay.
That's really our roots is as an interfaith organization, but our mission is meeting basic human needs for the greater Des Moines community. We bring people from different faith backgrounds and no faith backgrounds together. To unite to address the basic needs of our community. And we're primarily focused on our food pantry network. We've been doing that work with our food pantry network since 1976. Um, what that looks like today is a network of 15 different food pantries. One of those we own and operate at our headquarters on the south side, the D Market. But we have 14 other pantries we work with that we don't own and operate, but we have agreements with them. We provide them food. They have kind of a shared intake database, and we do a lot of the logistical, food ordering, getting it out to them, helping deliver food rescue. But we don't provide the entirety of their support. We don't charge them for food, but they also have operating costs like staff and rent that they support out of their own pockets. So we have a partnership with these other pantries. Like I said, we've got 15. They're across Des Moines, Ankeny, Clive, West Des Moines. Um, Probably missing one. I'm sorry in advance.
Yeah.
Uh, Johnston and Urbandale.
Okay.
I was missing two. Uh, and so we have that network of our partners. And through that network, we're assisting about 20,000 people in Greater Des Moines every month. And those have been record breaking numbers. Typically, our busiest month of the year is November. We always see a bit of an increase during the summer as kids are out of school and families are, turning to food pantries and other sources to make up for those free school meals their kids were getting. Um, February is typically our lowest month, but we have that network of pantries. We also have our mobile food pantry program, and then we also have a home delivery program. That was something that was started during the pandemic, really out of necessity. We knew there were people who were quarantined or homebound, couldn't leave, and were not able to access food pantries. So we launched our delivery program working with volunteers. We have a delivery hotline that's operated between 9 a.m. and noon, Monday through Friday. People can call in to place a delivery, and then we work with volunteers to get those delivered the following business day.
Wow.
So that's something that was started during the pandemic, but that thankfully we've been able to keep on. One of those things where we didn't think we had the capacity to do it before. We had talked about it. Pandemic kind of forced us to do that, and we actually saw a lot of support from the community in terms of volunteers helping field intake calls and do deliveries. It's still a bit of a lift, but we recognize that there are barriers people face in terms of transportation, and just it's just another way we're trying to meet that need.
You talked about your passion and it's evident as you speak. So if you had a magic wand, what is one thing that you would do to bring about this change towards food security?
Hmm. I can't say what I want to say, so I'm gonna try and think more diplomatic.
All right.
I think I would want if I could wave a magic wand, it would be to really make everyone in our community and really our state aware of the level of food insecurity that we have. I think food insecurity and poverty are often overlooked by our society. I think, especially in the Des Moines area, we hear about all these accolades our city receives, and we try to kind of diminish some of the pieces of our community that maybe we don't like food insecurity and poverty. But it's really important, and it's a daily experience for tens of thousands of people living in our community. And I think a lot of the time, um, not just legislators and elected officials, but other decision makers can live in a bubble where they aren't seeing the day-to-day experiences that people living in poverty are going through and really understand their lives, their reality. And then we see policies made that don't match up. And so I guess what I would like is for everyone to I guess maybe what I'd like is for everyone to live a day, a week in the shoes of someone who is really experiencing, um, a lot of poverty and hardship. Because if you haven't gone through that yourself, it's hard sometimes, I think, to maybe have that empathy for people who are going through it.
And that was my next question. So as our congregation is being rooted in justice and working to be truly justice seekers in this particular area of food security, what would you recommend to our congregation? What is one thing or a couple of things that our congregation can specifically do to bend the arc a little bit, a little closer to justice?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that you can do in the community. I mean, not just with DMARC, but so many different organizations around the community, even just thinking as your own congregation. I know you mentioned a community fridge. I think those are great. They fill a gap that food pantries, not everyone can meet the traditional food pantry hours. And it's a really great way, especially to involve food rescue. But I think just more broadly speaking, this is something I suggest to a lot of people I talk with is volunteer at a food pantry or somewhere where you are not necessarily at a food pantry, but somewhere where you're, in direct community with people experiencing poverty, and just talk with them, ask them about their life, their family, what they're going through. Because it not only builds empathy, but I think it really helps us challenge our own biases
Mm.
and preconceptions. Um, I hope your congregation, it sounds like your congregation's lifelong learners. I try to be a lifelong learner. I think learning from other people through conversation and just hearing their perspectives is just as important as book learning, watching documentaries, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So whether that's at a food pantry, whether that's through just like one-on-one outreach with folks in your community or neighborhood, Whatever that looks like, I think just finding a way, not only to, provide assistance or serve the community, but making sure you're not doing it in a transactional way, making sure you're doing it in a way, working with the community, hearing what their needs are, and taking those into consideration, and also just welcoming to be part of your overall community, even if that doesn't mean joining your congregation, but building
Sure.
those connections, relationships, I think is something really important.
Okay. My final question, and maybe like in a sentence or two to really galvanize and bring us home as we talked about being justice seekers in our congregation. What would justice in the form of food security really look like for us? How would we know what it is that we're trying to seek?
That is a great question. And it's something that you know, ask myself a lot and and don't know that I totally have it figured out. Um this is probably jumping more into theory than you were wanting, but I try to and follow the right to food movement. That's the idea that we view access to food as a human right. Now, as a rights-based framework, there's then some legal implications, but really, when it all boils down to it, I think what food justice for me looks like is, um, having the ability um, to grow food, to access nutritious food that meets your cultural dietary needs, that cost is not going to be a barrier, that geography is not going to be a barrier. I think there's issues of land sovereignty and
Mm,
climate obviously tied into food justice. I mean, I tell people that I could tie like virtually anything to food politics, because it is so integral in a lot of our systems, especially in the state of Iowa. Um, and so it's a little hard for me to like, I feel like, even envision of what that would look like. Sometimes I think it's hard to like, okay, no holds barred, like what's the future we want to see, what is that ideal, just future. um and it's so big, it's almost hard. you, I don't know. I see a thriving local food system, where workers aren't being exploited,
mm,
where people can access healthy food that meets their cultural and dietary needs whenever they want, with cost not being a barrier. Um, I need to work on articulating this in a very much more eloquent way. Um, but our food system is not just the food we eat as consumers, but it's tied in with the people who work at our grocery stores, with the
mm.
people growing our food, that I think often are experiencing food insecurity themselves.
Okay.
And so I think it would involve an entire reimagination of our food system, maybe our economic system to some extent. um, but I mean, the long and short of it is food insecurity exists because people can't afford to buy the food they need.
Mm.
Um, and how we solve that is addressing a lot of different things. So again, I'm sorry I didn't have a more eloquent response.
No, no. Well, no, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your answers, and I appreciate, just as you said, educating us. We are a group that likes to learn, that likes to be involved, and I think this is a very worthwhile topic for us to be even more involved with. So, Luke Elzinga from DMARC, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.